I'm Rose Champagne, and I'm going to be moderating today. Marty, well, he's clearly here in spirit, is not here, but that's okay. We can do this. Today we are going to have Andrei Chernosov, who is one of our physicians at Advocate Aurora, talking about kind of more the legal, social, different types of aspects of cannabinoids and marijuana use in palliative care. And I think we're going to have some slides, hopefully lots of discussion. And so feel free to put something in the chat and I'll hopefully recognize it and say something, or raise your hands or chime in. Is that cool, Andre?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Okay. And okay. So yeah, we've had discussions on marijuana, cannabis, THC in the past. I know about a year ago we had like a pharmacology lecture, but I feel like every time this topic is brought up, people tend to have a lot to say. And the conversation usually kind of gravitates more towards all of these kind of cultural, social, community, legal stuff. So, you know, we have a wonderful pre-recorded pharmacology lecture from last year. So this is kind of, you know, my thought process in doing this. So no disclosures at all. And kind of the format of this will be like this. Look, there's not really a lot of good research dealing with these the implications of marijuana with respect to medicine, at least from like the cultural, legal, societal standpoint. There's even less so with respect to, you know, hospice and palliative care. So really my format will be hopefully a very brief overview on these considerations, like the social and legal stuff, and then more of an open discussion where I would hope that people would participate and just kind of weigh in, because this is really kind of an ongoing and emerging thing right now, you know, all of this legalization and the medical use, recreational use. So, you know, rather than kind of rehashing old history, we are kind of making the history right now. So just as a side note, just yesterday in New Jersey opened their dispensaries. They legalized recreational a couple of years ago, but they're kind of dragging their feet on that. So it's just kind of interesting because I was just on vacation visiting my parents in New Jersey, and I came back a few days ago, but apparently this is a very big deal. Lines were going way down the street and things like that. So that's kind of the framework that I'm, you know, thinking about here. Just a very brief history. Hemp is one of the earliest cultivated crops since the pre-Neolithic period. There's evidence in Japan from 8000 BC. Cannabis is believed to be consumed by the Hindu god Shiva. In the early 1000 ADs, hashish spread west through the Persian Empire. Spanish brought hemp to the New World and began to cultivate it in Chile in 1545-ish. And it made its way up, and then eventually in the United States in 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed. Clearly, I'm glossing over a lot of things. This is just the Chinese symbol for hemp. It's two plants underneath a shelter, which is kind of interesting. And that's some medicinal cannabis from the pre-Marijuana Tax Act US. Just want to share a quick video.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently, they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes, hidden in an innocent shoe or watch case. In this startling film, you will see dopesters lure children to destruction.
We're going over to Joe's place. Why don't you come along? We have a date to play a set of doubles. Oh, you can play anytime. Come on, we'll have some laughs. Can I go along with you? Sure. Hey, I'll see you at dinner, sis.
If you want a good smoke, try one of these.
You will meet Bill, who once took pride in his strong will as he takes the first step toward enslavement.
Of course, if you're afraid.
Smoking the soul-destroying reefer, they find a moment's pleasure, but at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide. And the ultimate end of the marijuana addict. Hopeless insanity. See this important film now, before it is too late.
Let's get back. So yeah, that's kind of a very early film describing the dangers of marijuana, and kind of from the Marijuana Tax Act, and then really amped up when the war on drugs started in 1971 by President Nixon. He declared drug addiction as public enemy number one. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage an all-out offensive. And then, the term "the war on drugs" was termed, and unfortunately, this is not the case, as it's still ongoing. So this has been kind of controversial. I mean, there's people arguing various things on why this became such a big issue with Nixon. This particular thing was, this quote was very inflammatory. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the Vietnam War or Black, but by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. And that was by Nixon's advisor, John Ehrlichman. This has definitely come from, a very controversial place. Then, of course, DARE was founded. A lot of sources say that this program failed. Some of the reasons were the use of policemen to deliver the curricula rather than addiction treatment specialists, and kind of this whole scared straight policy. They would kind of exaggerate things, tell you that, every street corner you'll have people offering you drugs, and, you'll, kind of that whole reefer madness kind of thing. But research has actually shown that all this anti-drug stuff may actually increase curiosity about drug use, leading to increased use. And I just also included this picture because if anyone spent any time in arcades in the 90s, this screen was everywhere, just in front of kids' faces all the time. And I don't know, I remember it. So it's just kind of interesting. But things change. In October 2008, 3 in 4 Americans believed the war on drugs was failing. Nearly half of inmates in federal prisons are being held on drug charges. And then I'm not going to get into this private for-profit prison argument because that's a whole can of worms. But another poll found that 67% of Americans feel that treatment for drugs like cocaine and heroin would be better versus prosecution. So this is kind of a visual representation of how the war on drugs has been going. Public perception is changing. 60% of Americans, as of literally 2-3 weeks ago, support legalizing marijuana. They support loosening restrictions around marijuana convictions and banking. These are just some of the sentiments, positive and negative. Stronger economy, decarceration, less prescription pills I don't know if that would be true, but that's what people think would be one of the consequences. Some bad thoughts, more traffic accidents, productivity will go down. This one's particularly interesting. What's more harmful, to use regularly, marijuana or alcohol? Alcohol is the clear winner. Winner in terms of what causes more damage. Then policies are changing too. In Illinois, there's a bill to eliminate the marijuana testing requirement for those seeking to have their criminal records expunged. But federal law doesn't recognize the legitimacy of medical or recreational marijuana. So it really gets down to the states. And really the takeaway of this part here, at least, is just 2 states have these protections for recreational cannabis in addition to medical marijuana, because a lot of states do kind of have leniency. In case anyone is thinking of it and saying, it's legal where I did it. If you're in Wisconsin, it doesn't matter. You're not allowed to do it elsewhere and then come back and test positive. That's not protected under the Wisconsin Fair Employment Act. So, but what about patients? So a survey in 2015 showed that despite increased concerns about substance abuse, the majority of programs did not have substance abuse policies and diversion policies or report screening all patients. I think the actual number was about 40% had some form or another of a substance abuse or diversion policy. Whether it was comprehensive or not, I don't think that was measured, but 60% about had no policy. And just thinking about reasons for and against drug testing your patients in a palliative setting, we had a conversation at St. Luke's, like our morning rounds yesterday, about, a patient who admitted to smoking, and, he's a palliative patient and very ill. And a family member said, why not just let them enjoy that time they have left? And that's, a valid argument. So that's all I'm going to say about that now, because discussion time is later, just a few more slides. But kind of going along that line of thinking, where is the line drawn? This was apparently a real news report. Police have arrested a Minnesota man who checked his sick wife out of a nursing home to throw her a death party. So this is taking that philosophy of why not let the terminal patient have fun kind of to the extreme. He looks happy in his mugshot, so I guess they did have a good time. There's obviously also opposition to legalization efforts. This is a campaign banner for, I think, an Arizona congressman, kind of propaganda from the other side, pro versus against, benefits, nothing, zero, zilch, nada, none, risks, cancer, heart attack, overdose, emphysema, HIV, AIDS, malaria, apparently tuberculosis, leprosy. So you can see that it's a heated topic. But there's always ways to kind of get around this stuff. I mean, before New Jersey opened their dispensaries, this is the actual front page of a website that would deliver marijuana to your door. They would not sell it to you. They would give it to you for free and encourage a tip depending on the quality and the quantity that you received for free. A very obvious loophole, but this for the past, since January 2021, this has been operating in New Jersey completely legally because it was decriminalized, but the dispensaries didn't open. Similarly, this is a big thing in Wisconsin, going to Illinois for weed tourism. People cross the border. I mean, what is it, like an hour away? And they go to the dispensaries there. And then if you look at the bottom left, you see the nice state patrol officer waiting at the Kenosha way station, right on the border. And, just because it's not legal here, but still, it doesn't really stop people. And we've seen that pattern in the past. This on the left is a grape brick, which the instructions are to dissolve it in a gallon of water. Be very careful to prevent fermentation. Otherwise, you'd end up with a gallon of wine during the Prohibition. So very clearly marked not to do that. But I wonder how many people just conveniently forgot. So there's always, ways that people find ways to do things that they want to do. And it seems like, we kind of see which way the wind is blowing. I mean, if you looked at this same legalization map 10 years ago, almost none of this would be green. So even in just a decade, this has kind of, propagated across the country. And it's not just marijuana, it's other, drugs that are commonly thought to be recreational. The psilocybin mushrooms, they are currently, being researched as ways to kind of help patients with depression, and especially also with like this kind of depression related to dying. This drug DMT, it's a substance produced in tiny quantities in the pineal gland in your brain, but it's thought to kind of evoke that feeling of dying if in large quantities. So there's kind of thought about, it's related with dreams and kind of those weird near-death experiences. And from this article, the implications are quite profound, says one of the users. I feel sort of a bit more confident about what it's like to die because I can fill it in by saying, well, it is at least a little bit like what it is to be on DMT. And does that provide any kind of reassurance? It does in a weird kind of way. So it is kind of a therapeutic thing. And kind of related to the mushroom case, there is kind of a lawsuit going on in Washington because of this right to try law. So right to try is something that's on the federal level, and different states have it, where a terminal patient can try unapproved but under investigation or under research substances that are not available for most people. And all the green are states with right to try laws. The blue is kind of like an ongoing litigation, or not litigation, but ongoing, drafting of the law. And the only state that completely vetoed it was Hawaii, at the bottom in red. So in general, psychedelics for psychologic and existential distress, it's a promising and potential, it has a promising and potential role according to studies. This is just one that was done in Canada that comes to that conclusion. The problem is that there's a lot of barriers to actually doing quality research. There's stigma related to the methodologic and ethical shortcomings of earlier research into psychedelics in the 50s and 60s, which I do have a video of, but we'll just skip it for the sake of time. But basically the Army, the US Army, the British Army were kind of dosing soldiers with LSD and kind of seeing what happens, which is not ethical. And that stigma kind of remains. But it's kind of becoming more accepted in the public eye. So there's more and more research, but like I said in the beginning, there's really not that much. So I'm just kind of gonna end with this quote from the Tibetan Book of the Dead: "O nobly born, now is the moment. Before you is mind, open and wide as space, simple, without center or circumference. Now is the moment of death." And that's just kind of a perspective on how, when you die, your mind is wide open, and how, certain substances maybe can help you deal with that, spiritually, psychologically. So that's really it for me. These are just some talking points that I came up with off the top of my head, but I'm really hoping we can get some discussion in the time that we have left, because typically this is a topic that generates a lot of discussion. So I'm just curious about hearing everyone else's thoughts. I don't know if Rose, you want to look at the chat? I mean, I can't really see the chat with the PowerPoint open.
Yeah, I'm able to see it. And, I thought that this also is a great forum because we do have people from different states that have different legal practices. And so I guess for anyone who is in a state that does have legal, medicinal or recreational use, has this become an issue? Has this changed practice? Do you do anything differently? I can say from in the past, when I dealt with a lot of chronic pain folks, and we would do urine screens to make sure they were taking their drugs, we were very particular about what we tested for, because marijuana was pretty low on the list of things that we were concerned about. So I can say that from years ago in practice. If I knew a patient who was on opioids also smoked marijuana or for their pain, a lot of times we wouldn't test for it. We would specifically test for their opioid or any other, cocaine use, more kind of things that we felt were more serious to address.
I think one of the experience that I recently have in the clinic is having more open discussion when patients are using it. I think most of the patients now want to talk about it. If they're using it for their anxiety or for their nausea or for anorexia, I would usually ask them, do you want to talk about it? You know, what kind of effects do you have? Have you seen any difference? And they do have a lot of questions. Sometimes, they feel like they use it, but then sometimes they are very hesitant to talk with their providers about that they are using it, why they are using it. So that is an open dialogue that I think is changing now. And there was a research study I felt like I read like a couple of months ago that this is what they want. I think most of the patients feel that they're not being asked about their use, they are not being educated about it, and even if they ask about it, a lot of the times they don't get the right answers. So I think that is something that I have been trying to change in my practice, is talk with them that why they're using it, what do we feel is making that change, is there any other medication that we can use for it? And again, answering their questions, according to our best knowledge, what we have about marijuana right now. But I agree. I mean, it's becoming less of a thing that, okay, if you're using this, we are not going to give you certain opiates or certain medication. It's about becoming more about talking about why are you using it? Let's see, how we can help you. If there are other medications that we can add, and see how we can get the best benefit for your symptom control.
Thanks, Pooja. I agree. I think patients want to know if their behaviors are impacting their other medications. I mean, we have patients all the time in advanced heart failure who are like, is it okay that I'm using this CBD? Or, they want to know. It's not that they're trying to do illicit things. They're trying to help their pain or nausea or whatever.
Yeah, I think as it's becoming a more like widespread and accepted and mainstream thing, patients tend to kind of open up a bit more, whereas in the past, when it's been kind of like the popular perception has been like this no tolerance, like, policy, people wouldn't really, I mean, they know you're their doctor, and we are bound by HIPAA and things like that, but still they don't want to tell us. But now it seems like it's kind of more open. And I remember in fellowship too, I remember at least a couple of patients coming in saying, oh, can you prescribe this for me? And we had to tell them, sorry, we don't do that.
I think also it opens the door for providers to be more honest. I know in our transplant program, our pharmacist does talk about these things, because I think that the initial assumption when we ask questions about drug use is a judgment, right? But in certain illnesses with certain medications, it might be more about medication reactions, versus, trying to make a judgment about what someone is doing with recreational drugs. So I think it opens the door for providers as well to talk about safety issues, things that aren't regulated, that sort of stuff.
I do wonder too about that whole sentiment of why not just let, so-and-so enjoy the time they have left, because especially when we talk about hospice and quality of life and enjoying the time that you have and this and that. And, I mean, what if this is one of the things that they enjoy? I mean, it's not legal. It's probably not good for them. But then again, a lot of stuff isn't good for us. But, it is a good question. Like, where do you kind of draw the line with, well, so-and-so, they have stage 4 cancer, like just why do you care, or why do we care what they're, doing in their free time if they're just trying to kind of live before they, with the time that they have. But yeah.
All right. Thank you, Andre. I did put in the chat the number and password to claim CME. So thanks everyone, and we'll be back next week.